This is your profanity warning. Your warning that bad words are about to be said in the following podcast. If there are children in the room, in the house, or indeed within a 5-mile radius, please send them away. This podcast is not for us. Is that good?
Yeah, it was great. That was perfect.
Okay.
Grave robbing in Texas is this hour's top news story. An informant led officers of the Muerto County Sheriff's Department to a cemetery just outside the small rural Texas community of Newt early this morning. Officers there discovered what appeared to be a grisly work of art, the remains of a badly decomposed body wired to a large monument.
Coming to you live from the recent past in New York City, where we hang skulls from the ceiling and throw human teeth at each other. Welcome to 21 Jump Scare. I'm Bradford Lorick.
And I'm Eric Winnick.
21 Jump Scare is a podcast about horror films, told from several points of view.
We call this podcast 21 Jump Scare because, at least for now, our plan is to only produce 21 of them.
Well, but also because, as in a certain TV series from the late 80s, one of us is going back to school, as it were, to learn something new. And this neophyte will be experiencing a horror film he hasn't seen yet.
As assigned by a true horror aficionado, which is to say, you, Bradford.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome. So each week we bring you a film from the perspective of someone rewatching it, and from the point of view of somebody experiencing it for the first time. So now let us turn to this week's film, 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
August 18th, 1973. Siblings Sally and Franklin Hardesty are driving through rural Texas in a van with their friends Kirk, Jerry, and Pam, on their way to a graveyard where, it has been reported, someone has been digging up corpses and arranging them like topiary.
Sally and Franklin have to make sure that their grandfather's corpse was not unearthed and turned into sculpture at the cemetery.
Satisfied that no such event has occurred, the gang hits the road again and soon picks up a hitchhiker who talks about his former job at a local slaughterhouse, shows them pictures of his handiwork, and just for fun, cuts his arm and Franklin's. After summarily dismissing the hitchhiker, the friends find that the van is quickly running out of gas. Stopping by a roadside station, they are disappointed to find the station is also out of gas and politely decline the owner's offer to stay for a barbecue meal. The gang drives on to an abandoned home where Sally and Franklin once lived, and Kirk and Pam decide to wander down to a swimming hole for a little post-road trip nookie. Distracted by the fact that the swimming hole doesn't exist, they decide to head up to a nearby house and ask the owner for a tank of gas. Unfortunately, no one seems to be home. So Kirk does what any sane person would do, which is wander into the empty house, which is filled with strange items like human bones, skulls, feathers, and all manner of skin-related end products, which are not to be confused with high-end skin products. Kirk then finds himself coming face to face.
High-end skin products. I see what you're doing there.
Kirk then finds himself coming face to face with the house's primary occupant, a sledgehammer-wielding psychopath, the likes of which neither he nor any of the others, including film audiences worldwide, have encountered before.
Excellent point, Mr. Winnick.
Thank you.
Swimming holes dry up in Texas.
They do.
They do. It's a real problem.
Who knew?
Goddamn Texas heat. So Eric, who is in this film?
This film stars a lot of actors you've never heard of, but that's A-okay because they all deliver the goods.
Speaking of good, the good guys include Marilyn Burns as Sally, Alan Danziger as her boyfriend Jerry, Paul A. Pertain as Sally's paraplegic brother Franklin, Teri McMinn as Pam, William Vail as her boyfriend Kirk.
And then you have the crazy guys who form this sort of demented family. Edwin Neal as a hitchhiker that we meet early in the film. Jim Siedow as the gas station and barbecue pit owner. And of course, Gunnar Hansen as a character known only as Leatherface, who seems to be some kind of inbred backroads country hick, though we really don't get enough backstory to tell.
Well, they are all sort of inbred backroads country hicks, right? The film was directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Hooper and Kim Henkel. And this was Tobe Hooper's breakthrough film. And afterwards, he went on to direct the TV miniseries of Salem's Lot, which I know has a very special place in your heart, Eric, as well as Poltergeist and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, too.
Did you see the sequel?
I did. In fact, I saw the sequel before I saw the original.
Okay, that makes no sense.
Eric, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of those movies that I was nervous to see. It has such a reputation for being this like outrageously visceral, gory experience. And I remember when my dad rented the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS. It was one of 2 horror films that I was not allowed to watch when I was a kid.
So you saw the sequel instead?
I saw the sequel instead, which is, quite frankly, it's like a much tamer and quite comedic film. It is not a spiritual sequel to the film. It's like a sequel in name only. It's as if a completely different group of artists got together to make it.
Okay, so how'd this film do, Bradford?
Well, this film was made for the princely sum of about $300,000 and wound up grossing $30.8 million in the US, which is not a bad haul.
So our pal Roger Ebert said, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is as violent and gruesome and blood-soaked as the title promises, a real grand guignol of a movie. It's also without any apparent purpose, unless the creation of disgust and fright is a purpose. And yet, in its own way, the movie is some kind of weird, off-the-wall achievement. I can't imagine why anyone would want to make a movie like this, and yet it's well made, well acted, and all too effective. End quote.
Well, gullible as ever, Raj went on to say, the movie's based on factual material, according to the narration that opens it. For all I know, that's true, although I can't recall having heard of these particular crimes, and the distributor provides no documentation.
Oh, Raj.
So now it's time that we like to issue a full spoiler alert.
Yes, we will be spoiling this film completely and utterly from here on in. If you have not seen this film and you plan to, please watch the film, make sure you have a good stiff drink, then come back and listen to the rest of this episode. So, Bradford, talk to me. How did you first hear about this film and where did you see it?
I have just always kind of been aware of this film, ever since I was a little kid. And like I said, there were very few films that I was not allowed to watch. My dad would take me to the video store every weekend, and I would pick out whatever R-rated horror shit I wanted to see, and it was always okay. I had very little limitation on what I could watch.
Yeah, clearly.
But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the 2 films that I was not ever allowed to watch. The second being The Silence of the Lambs.
Unbelievable.
And I was much older when The Silence of the Lambs came out. My mother thought it would be a much better idea to give me the book instead of letting me see the movie.
Good idea, Mom. Yep.
Yeah. So that said, because I was such a voracious little aficionado of the genre from the very beginning, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of those things that I just was always aware of. I remember seeing the video box in the store, but knowing that there was something about it that I wasn't supposed to know, And so it probably wasn't until I was in college on a summer break that I actually saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I rented it with a very good friend of mine at the time at home during the summer. We rented it and we watched it. And I don't think I'll ever forget the first time I saw it. And it was not under any kind of ideal circumstances. I was watching it on VHS on a little television in my bedroom at home at my parents' house. And I mean, it still managed to make a serious impression.
I mean, I've been hearing about this film for years. When I first heard about it, I said to myself, I wasn't into horror films, but I said to myself, that is a film I will never, ever see.
And now you have.
And now I have. Why did you choose this film for me to see, Professor?
I mean, it should be obvious, Mr. Winnick. It is a genre-defining classic. I mean, it is, it kicks off the slasher horror film subgenre, really. Although, I think some would classify it more as a folk horror film, but I mean, it certainly does allow an entree for the Jason Voorheeses and the Freddy Kruegers and the Michael Myers.
I, now having seen it, find that very curious. Do you think it's something that kind of crosses the line, or do you think it's something that sort of straddles the genres?
I mean, I suppose, if something like Deliverance is folk horror, then this is too, but this just goes that much further. This introduces power tools.
True. But doesn't that kind of make it a slasher? I mean, that's sort of what...
Well, I think that's why it's hard to categorize easily.
Yeah.
But Eric, you were seeing this classic film for the very first time. So what did you think of this film, sir?
Well, I have to say that as we were just saying, its reputation does precede it. And so for years I was, the film is called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, what is, is there much room for guesswork there?
Right. What does that conjure,
Yeah, exactly. And so I had also heard more recently that one thing that surprised people who saw this film after hearing so much about it is how little gore there really is in it. And it is kind of remarkable when you watch it, how much is really left to the imagination. And I don't know if that was done for artistic or budgetary purposes. I suspect the latter, but at the same time, it is still very effective.
Well, that Tobe Hooper intended this thing to have a PG rating. And I think that's why the gore was kept to the minimum that it was.
Right.
There was no way in hell that this was going to be a PG film.
No, not at all.
They're lucky they got an R.
Although we also have to remember that the original title of this film was Leatherface. And this you really only know this if you watch any number of behind the scenes making of documentaries where you see the clapboard and it says quite clearly Leatherface. And so you have to hand it to whomever it was, be it Hooper or the marketing executive at whatever mafia run distribution
company, right?
Right. Who said, no, we're going to call it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When you think about it, one of the most brilliant marketing decisions in the history of film.
1,000%.
Absolutely. And so the thing is that I think what struck me was how, I don't want to say tame, because it's not tame, but it's just not, it's not as stomach churning as you think it's going to be. It's also funny.
Not for reasons of gore.
Well, right. But also how funny it is. There are moments, I will just say, when watching this film, and I can't say this of all the films we've watched, where I had to pause the movie and go back and just sit and look at a frame for a minute, because either the composition or the moment or just something about what was going on struck me as so ridiculous and horrifying at the same time, that it was remarkable to me how a film could be this funny and this fucking off the wall at the same time. It's like, we'll get into it later, but the dinner scene,
Well.
and I don't want to get too much into it now, but it's just, so I will just say that I was impressed by the fact that it was able to do so many things at the same time. And you know, it's not a film you admire for its plot. It's not a film you admire for its writing. It's not even a film you admire for its acting. It's a film you admire for its audacity. And that's what I'll say about it.
I totally appreciate that. And I mean, do you sort of take away any of the sort of political discourse that Hooper and Henkel were attempting to bring to this film?
No.
Okay.
And it may be just because I haven't either watched enough about it, or it's only been a couple days since I've seen it. I just haven't read that much into it. You know, I haven't.
I mean, it is
me.
Contextually, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but it is meant to sort of be a response to the Vietnam War, to Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal, and to Ford's pardoning of Nixon.
Oh, interesting.
And the collision of all of these things, the filmmakers were sort of responding to the senselessness and the horror of the world in which they were living, and this was their artistic response to the context, you know, the sort of like geopolitical global context in which the film was made.
Well, you sort of get that in the beginning when you listen to the announcer on the radio, talking about all the crazy shit that's going on in the world. And I can't remember everything, but they mention the grave robbing. They mention
there's a suicide.
Exactly. There's some mass explosion that kills people at a plant somewhere, and it's just one atrocity after another. And it is, I mean, you know, it's sad, but at the same time, it's like it's funny because it's just like it just keeps going, you know. You know, again, that's like another thing about this film that's just, you just don't expect how funny it's going to be. I want to talk about three scenes in particular, and you can bring up whatever you want, but I want to talk about three scenes that to me feel kind of emblematic of the film's approach.
I mean, are you singling these out as your favorite scenes in the film?
No, I should say these scenes strike me as illustrative of what works well about the film. In other words, that I think embody Hooper's intent to some extent, at least as it struck me.
Take it away.
So the first one is, we'll just call it the dismemberment of Kirk in front of Pam. The next one is the dinner scene, and then the very end scene, which is the sort of chaotic chase into the street at the end. Let's go to the dinner scene. I'm curious as to your thoughts about this. This scene takes place sort of late in the film. Sally is the only one left, really, of the original group.
Yeah, the rest of the the rest of the folks in the mystery machine have already been dispatched.
Yeah, that's right. Velma's gone, Scooby's gone, Shaggy's gone, Fred, they're all gone. Good comparison there. And the hitchhiker whom we have met at the beginning of the film, they pick him up for God knows what reason, is back because he's made his way to the house.
He's a member of the family.
He's apparently Leatherface's brother, and the old man, who is only identified as the old man from the gas station, is there as well. He has abducted Sally and brought her to the house, and they form a kind of, Leatherface and the hitchhiker and the old man form a kind of a weird family.
Right.
Leatherface is wearing a wig at this point.
Is Leatherface wearing a wig, or is that hair that's attached to somebody else's head?
I don't know. I thought it was like a wig. It could have been somebody's actual hair, for all we know. The hitchhiker feels like the son. The old man is the father who keeps chastising the kids for screwing stuff up. We don't know what that is, but he's just like, you damn fools, you screwed it up again. It's like, what did they screw up?
They screwed up the abduction and murder and processing into food of this group of, hapless travelers, right?
I mean, I don't know. It seems like they did successfully capture. They captured Franklin. They captured Pam. They captured Kirk. And they captured Jerry. So they've got 4 of them.
Right.
So Sally's the one that remains. So maybe he's mad that they didn't kill her, or she's still alive. Unclear. But anyway, it's funny because you don't expect to see the chainsaw wielding maniac being chastised for being a bad boy.
Right.
So it's almost like, and he seems truly remorseful that he did something wrong, even though he's
totally ashamed, right?
He's totally ashamed. He doesn't speak, of course. There's no language that comes out of his mouth, but the old man he's upset with him somehow for doing something. And again, there's 2 moments here where I just have to stop the movie and say, what in the name of all that's holy? And there's the first moment is when Sally's finger is sliced open and then placed in the mouth of a grandpa who is a dead man.
Well, he's not.
Well, but is he? I mean, I wanted to ask you about that because it seems like he's like a puppet that they've animated. They've taken a corpse somehow and they put Sally's finger in his mouth, and it's not clear whether he's moving or they're moving him to make it seem like he's alive and sort of, reanimating somehow. What was your take on that?
No, he's alive. He's very old and absolutely enfeebled. But when we meet Grandpa for the first time, it's when Sally is running from Leatherface through the house. She runs up the stairs and into the attic, where she encounters a room full of taxidermy, including Grandma. But Grandpa is still alive.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me because they're pretty inert. I mean, and
absolutely.
I wasn't even clear that he was alive during the dinner scene because he doesn't move a lot. He doesn't really say much, and he doesn't say anything. And when I saw him move, when they put Sally's finger in his mouth, and then I didn't see him move later, I thought to myself, well, they must have been sort of moving him in a sense of sort of willing him alive somehow.
No, I mean, I do love that sort of idea, but no, Grandpa, I think, or rather, I've always understood Grandpa to be alive. Very old, very again, enfeebled, but he's alive, and when they slit Sally's finger and put the blood in his mouth, he suckles from her finger. And I don't know whether it's the blood, the life force, the metaphorical exchange that sort of restores him, or what. I mean, and it's not like it's not like watching Dracula, right? I mean, it's not like he becomes a young man when he drinks her blood, but I think the taste of human blood in this family of cannibals is enough to sort of give him a little bit of a boost, right?
I guess. I mean, I think that the issue was it wasn't clear to me that he was alive.
Right.
But I can certainly, now that you mention it, sort of see how he could be. Earlier when I was describing the scene, I think I said there's a dead man at the head of the table.
But I mean, he does appear to be.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, but during the dinner scene, and I think I think there is a lot to talk about in the dinner scene, but as they're talking about Grandpa, they're talking about how he was the fastest at the slaughterhouse.
Yep.
He could dispatch the greatest number of cattle in the shortest number of time,
and he didn't use that damn air gun, right?
He did it with a hammer.
Yep.
And so they put the hammer in Grandpa's hand.
Okay, this is where but this is the next part that I was going to mention, which was,
all right, go on.
This moment where Sally's head is kind of forced, well, Sally herself is sort of forced into this metal basin with her head down, and a hammer is placed in Grandpa's hand. And what's crazy is that, try as he may, he can't seem to hit Sally's head, which is like a moment of pure slapstick that should be absolutely horrifying. But it's just like, it's funny because it's like he can't hit her.
And the hammer
It's
seems
not because he doesn't want to, it's just he misses.
right. Well, the hammer seems to be too heavy for him to wield at this point. They keep picking it up out of the the metal bucket and putting it back in his hand.
Yeah.
He does, of course, land one blow. And I think that moment when he lands the blow is pretty extraordinary, right? Because, I mean, it kind of undercuts all of those humorous attempts leading up to it, right?
But does he really get her? I mean,
he gets her.
Because she gets out of there pretty quickly after it. She crashes through the window, lands on the ground. It's daylight, which that moment is crazy because you're like,
yeah,
it's daytime. But anyway,
how long has that dinner been?
Exactly. Well, how long was she out before it?
Right.
But the thing is, yeah, I wasn't, honestly, again, this is like, you've seen this film more times than I have, but it wasn't clear to me that he had landed the blow, because if he had, it doesn't seem like she could have moved that quickly to get out of there.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of power behind it, but it does land a
true.
good hit. Yeah.
So again, that scene it's pretty extraordinary when you think about it. And the composition, the way it's shot, is from her point of view. So you've got hitchhiker on the left, and then you've got dad. I'm sorry. Yeah, I keep thinking of his dad, the old man.
He may
to his
be.
left.
I mean, he's probably dad and cousin and maybe brother.
That's true.
I mean, they're an inbred redneck cannibal family. As you do, sure.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, keep going with composition.
Sort of the modern day Republican Party. But anyway,
right.
The across the table is Leatherface, and I don't remember. Does he bring in the food?
Well, at that point, Leatherface is wearing one of his 3 leather faces.
Okay.
And he's wearing the head skin of a woman at this point.
Seems,
and he's
yes,
right, which I think it's kind of fascinating to watch how the mask that he chooses to wear influences his behavior, his role in the family, his role in the house.
Exactly. He's feminized at that point.
He's feminized. He's wearing an apron.
Right.
And there's there's a moment where you see him putting lipstick on the mask. I mean, he is kind of playing the female mother figure, providing food for the family around the dinner table, right?
That's right.
I mean, it's this very perverse kind of Norman Rockwell scene that just happens to feature, like a plateau on the table with a chicken's head on top of it and chicken feet holding it up. I mean, all of these like revulsive kinds of set pieces and props that have been put together for this film, but I mean, it really is kind of like a perversion of, like that classic American dinner scene.
Again, when we talk about scenes that sort of, typify this film, that sort of sum up what this film is doing. The end scene is so chaotic. It's such a mess, but it's also loads of fun to watch because so many things happen in rapid succession.
Sure.
In this scene. So Sally escapes from the house. She runs down the driveway. The hitchhiker / son is in pursuit of her. She runs out to the street. The hitchhiker is in the street. An 18-wheeler comes barreling
along
through the street and absolutely mows down the hitchhiker. At that point, Leatherface comes running out, and
Leatherface has also been giving chase the whole time.
Yes. And then the truck driver, this I didn't understand at all. The truck driver and Sally run into the cab of the truck, but instead of driving away, they get chased through the cab
by Leatherface
to the other side of it. The truck driver throws a wrench at Leatherface, which knocks him down.
Causing him to drop the chainsaw on his own leg.
Right. The truck driver disappears from shot completely. A pickup truck comes along.
Mm-hmm.
Sally jumps in the back. Leatherface still in pursuit. And the truck speeds off to God knows where. And she's laughing her head off because...
covered in blood.
She's the final girl, or she's because she's the first final girl in the history of horror films, but also because apparently they had to reshoot the scene and she was just dead tired. And of course, Leatherface starts doing this dance with his chainsaw. Absolutely gorgeous sunrise behind him.
It's kind of beautiful.
And it's this iconic moment, I guess, that has nothing to do with anything. There's no reason for him to start exulting and dancing. I mean, he just lost his prey. I mean, she's gone. We don't know where she's going. We don't know what becomes of her, but doesn't matter because at that point, Leatherface is dancing with his chainsaw in the air, and then it just cuts to black. And then the credits roll. It's really abrupt and really kind of weird the way this film ends. What do you make of that ending?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. You know, I mean, there's a quote about, you know, when words are not powerful enough to express a feeling, you sing, right? And when a song is not powerful enough to express a feeling, you dance, right? Leatherface really has no capacity for speech. I think he's modern dancing his feelings in front of the sunrise. I think that, you know, it's his frustration, it's his rage, and I think it all comes out in this very strange movement where it's this guy with this extension of him, you know, just God, expressing all of these emotions on the highway. You know, he's just sawn into his own flesh. He's lost his prey. When he gets back at home, you know, Daddy is probably not going to be too pleased with him.
No.
His brother, the hitchhiker, is dead.
Yep.
What is there to do, right? He's got to sort of express all of this in some way. He shows it by dancing with his chainsaw.
So you're saying it's not joy, it's not a dance of joy, it's a dance of just expressing some emotion, whatever.
Well, I mean, I think it's a collision of emotions, right? I mean, what is there to be joyful about in this moment for Leatherface?
There's something very there's like exaltation in it to me. It just seems like almost like he's doing like a ballet. It's like he's pirouetting, you know, with this...
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's not balletic, but I don't know that it's like a happy dance, you know. But
yeah.
With the cut to black, I mean, I think like so many aspects of this film, there's a kind of verite quality to it. You know, it doesn't knit itself up neatly at the conclusion. It just ends, right?
Yeah.
Much like it begins.
Is anybody home? Hello? Hey, Pam. Hello?
Okay, I want to talk about the production design for a second because that house is so freaky. And I saw an interview with Robert A. Burns, the production designer, who, I don't know if you saw the same making of documentary as me, but there's one in which he has two life-size dolls standing behind him that are clothed in these ruffles, and it's you don't see the whole dolls, but you see enough of them to know that this guy has got some things going on in his house. And anyway, he talks about how they would just go to collect dead things because farmers didn't often have ways of getting rid of their dead animals, that they would bring them to a corner of the field and just let them decompose.
And roadkill. I mean,
and
the
roadkill.
armadillos.
The
and what
armadillo.
have you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so this house is full of skulls of people and animals, and there's things hanging from the ceiling. I mean, there's tons of decoration going on, and you know, it's a lot of this we see in subsequent films. You know, Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs,
John Doe. I mean,
right?
The kind of stuff that Fincher does throughout the entirety of Seven,
and
a lot of it owes to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The level of filth and
an American Horror Story. Asylum season 2, the therapist played by Zachary Quinto. Not to spoil that too much, but let's just say that he takes a cue from all of this as well at the very end.
But of course, Eric, I mean, Burns takes a cue from real life, from Ed Gein.
From Ed Gein. And this is kind of where we have to talk about Ed Gein, I suppose.
Yeah.
I would say this film is sort of very loosely based on Ed Gein. I think that there is the house may be more based on Ed Gein than the character.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
there's a little bit of connective tissue, one might say. No pun intended. Or
no pun intended. Is this the point in the podcast where you say the house is a character, Bradford?
No, it's not. I mean,
okay.
The house is a filthy, disgusting environment. I don't think I wouldn't say it's a character in the film, you know?
Although the point where Pam goes sprawling into the room full of feathers, the floor is like knee deep in feathers. And
there's a chicken in a fucking bird cage in the kitchen.
There is.
And there are meat hooks hanging from the ceiling. And there are pieces of furniture that are just assemblages of human and animal bone and sinew.
You know what? There's I don't know what to call it. It's like a love seat, I guess. It's a couch.
It's a settee.
It's beautiful.
It's bovine bones. It's crowned with a human skull.
Beautiful.
I mean, you know, and quite honestly, there are very expensive pieces of furniture that you can buy that are made out of steer horns and things like that. Do you know? And other kinds of antlers and bones. And quite frankly, in his home in Beverly Hills, Vincent Price had human skeleton chairs. They were carved wood to look like human skeletons. But I mean, there is a long history of using those kinds of materials, those kinds of motifs in interior design.
The chair that Sally is seated in at dinner, she's got her hands on top of skeleton hands. Yeah, exactly. Like at several points I had to look and I'm like, why are there 4 sets of hands? And then I'm realizing, those Sally's hands on top of skeleton hands. And I was like, that's genius.
I mean, the entire production design contributes to this overall feeling of like greasy filth.
It's not like the van is anything really something. It's not like the gas station is really much. It's not like the original house that they grew up in is just kind of like a deserted old house. It's an
old kind of Blair Witch Project tumble down.
What do they call it? The Franklin house?
Yeah.
There's the house that they originally go in, Kirk and Pam, and then he sees the other house.
Right. Well, it's Sally and Franklin's grandfather's homestead.
Right. Yes. Thank you. That's the original house. And
it probably would have been a very lovely home if it had not been in such tumble down condition, right? And then they go to the
Leatherface's house.
Cannibal family's home.
Right, exactly. So exactly. So but that seems to be where they poured the majority of the budget into, was making sure this house just absolutely was a chamber of horrors in every way. Yes,
and it was.
It was, which may have just in a way contributed to the mystique and the legacy of this film in a big way. Just the story behind it. It's very rare that the story behind a film is almost as important as the film itself.
I mean, I don't know how they ever got the
Yeah.
stink of the filthy roadhouse whiskey out of that house. Do you know what I mean? So what is the takeaway for you? I mean, we're talking about all of these scenes and these moments. I mean, did you like the movie? Did it scare you?
I mean, my answer to this is going to be the same as every other film. I mean, it's just I experience them differently now than I would have when I was a kid. And it's just, it really, I hate to say it because it sounds like I've just lost all joy in life, but it really takes a lot to freak me out. You know, I've watched all these films. I'm still watching horror films on my own or television, and it takes a lot to really creep me out. And another time we can talk about those moments that I can honestly say I was terrified by a movie, but it's been a while.
Mhm.
And I was not terrified by this film. I was not really scared by this film. I was just kind of amazed by it.
Uh-huh.
You know, so again, as I said, you know, I admire it for its audacity. I
Uh-huh.
admire it for what it achieves.
What does it achieve? What does it leave you with at the end?
I don't know.
I mean, is it purely that they were able to do it as this sort of the ultimate story of the ultimate indie film where it's made for so little money, and it cleans up in the global box office, or what?
Sure. Let's say that. I mean, the thing is that I think that, you know, for a film that
So
you
you're
spend
applauding Henkel and Hooper's entrepreneurialism?
absolutely, well, I mean, they got hoodwinked in a big way, didn't they? So
Yeah,
I don't know how
they did.
they may have been
By the mob.
entrepreneurial, but they were, by the end, didn't really take much away themselves. But I don't know. I mean, I guess for a film that you spend such a period of your life fearing, to come away feeling like, okay, I can watch this now, and not only can I watch it, but I can appreciate it as an artistic achievement. I don't know. It kind of feels like, in a way, you know, I wish that I had seen it at an age where I could have really been truly scared by it. I can appreciate, on one sense, how horrifying Sally's experience is, and she
Mhm.
certainly screams enough to make us convinced that she's terrified. But at the same time, this sort of meta commentary is going in your head where you're like, oh, that's funny. Oh, I see what they're doing there. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, great. Oh, though that production design is fantastic. Or
Right.
oh my God, he can't hit her with a hammer, you know, or just like when Pam is hung up on the meat hook, you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be so, I mean, it's terrible, obviously, but it could have been so much worse. You could have seen the hook
Right.
go into her back. You don't. So at the same time, you're going, wow, that was really effective. So this kind of meta commentary is going on in your head while you're watching the film that I don't want to say takes away from your appreciation, but makes it more of a clinical exercise.
But
than-
I mean, let's explore that just a little bit more. For me, I wouldn't call it so much meta commentary as I would call it sort of a relentless verite experience, right? I mean, you're not seeing, it's not storyboarded to death like, like a contemporary, like Michael Bay's remake was, where you do see all of those things happen, right? I mean, it's like you're sort of like a captive observer of everything that's going on around you. And I do think that it's one of those rare film experiences, maybe kind of like the Human Centipede 2, where, I mean, you really do just feel like sweaty, hot, greasy, and filthy after you've watched the film, or at least I do. And that's the part of it that, I've seen this film remarkably few times, and every time I see it, I always sort of come away with, I don't need to do that again. or I don't need to do that again for a while.
I think the last film that I saw where I felt like, I don't know where this is going, but every time it gets dark in this film, I know something is going to scare the shit out of me. Was the original Blair Witch Project, which I saw at the Angelica Film Center when it came out. And that was maybe the scariest film experience I've ever had.
Well, sure. I mean, on a big screen with great sound, having a collective experience with an audience full of people,
and the subway rumbling underneath. It really was. But it was more than that. It was the sense that, like, I don't know where this film is going. I don't know where it's going to take me. But where it is taking me is to a terrifying place, and it just gets more terrifying until that final moment of, and you know what I'm talking about, where just like it just comes to a climax and then it ends like that, and you're just like, you just can't get up. You're just frozen in your seat for a while. Like, it's been a while since I felt that way, and maybe it is watching it in my house, but I have had experiences also where I'm watching a film at home and I will be truly captivated by it and disturbed by it. And I don't want to be disparaging, or I don't want to offend you in any way by saying that these films are not terrifying me. I don't want to make
there's
you
no way to capture the experience.
No,
I mean, there's no way to recreate the experience of, like, seeing it with an audience in a theater. You know, I mean, I have seen a million horror films. I've seen the great majority of those at home. You know, I mean, or with friends. But there are I can count on one hand the number of horror movie experiences that I've found truly terrifying, and they have all been because of that sort of collective experience in a crowded movie theater late at night in the dark on a huge screen. Things like The Descent or The Strangers or Paranormal Activity, things that I have rewatched, like Paranormal Activity, at home in the afternoon, and it is utterly denuded of its power. But when you have that experience, and I don't know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be that thing. I mean, I think some of the acting, specifically Paul Partain's, is like terrible, or annoying to the point of distraction.
But at the same time, it's like, this is the slasher that launched 1,000 slasher films when you think about it, so it's like there are elements to this, including, The Final Girl, that we've seen again and again in subsequent films. And so maybe to some extent, it's like, because of the influence of this film, watching the original is denuded of its impact in a way.
I think some of the low budget shows through at times. I also think that it's ultimately kind of a very thin story. You don't particularly care for any of the characters. There's very little emotional investment on your part as an audience member with the characters or the actors. It's a relatively sort of compressed timeline in which the entire sort of narrative occurs. Right. When we talk about scenes in this movie, I think it's a hard movie to sort of break scenes out of, because it's after a certain point, it's kind of just continuous action. It's all chase, it's like chase and capture and chase and capture. And it's ultimately the same character, Sally, Marilyn Burns, who's caught and released and caught and released and caught and released ad nauseum throughout the universe. I don't know if it's sort of just a very particular kind of time capsule. And I don't know if seeing this in the cinema as an adult in 2021, I would find this film to be particularly scary. I would still find it deeply unpleasant, but not, I don't think I would find it scary. But I think a lot of the power of it is to kind of get under your skin. And I think it successfully does that.
So to speak.
Yeah, so to speak.
Franklin. It's gonna be a fun trip. If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm gonna be able to take it.
We have to talk about Franklin.
We have to talk about Franklin.
We have to talk about Franklin. A couple questions I have for you. So first is, as nice as it is to see a character with disabilities in this film or any film, I mean, there really needs to be more representation in films in general. And the fact that he is a paraplegic is not really a big deal, really, in any way. He's just a character who happens to be a paraplegic.
That's true.
There is one scene in which I feel his disability is played for laughs, and he's helped out of the van. He rolls to the side of the road with a coffee can, and he's clearly going to relieve himself. And a truck drives by, a semi drives by, and the wind from the truck pushes him over and he goes rolling down a hill. And I don't know how it's meant to be taken, but to me it's like, the 2021 me, cringes when I see that, because I'm just like, are they making fun of this character? And the fact is that the portrayal of Franklin, he's such a whiner. What do you make of this character?
I despise this character. I can't tell if I don't enjoy how it's written or I don't enjoy what the actor has brought to the performance.
Right.
I mean, from the moment we get to the homestead of Franklin and Sally's grandfather, which is essentially the sole reason for the film, right? And then they go off to visit the homestead where they grew up. And Franklin, I mean, the number of times that this guy is sort of left behind, or can't get himself into the same room as the rest of his friends, and blows raspberries at the sky ad nauseum, ad infinitum.
I think there's meant to be. I mean, I don't think he's just physically challenged. I think he also is incredibly kind in a way to the hitchhiker, who is very clearly deranged. And the thing is that the others are all like watching in horror as he's having this conversation about the slaughterhouse and the air gun and stuff like that. And you think that anybody who is of more sound mind would instantly get that this hitchhiker is insane.
Oh, I mean, I think that the entire van full of, friends are being exceptionally careful with how they're treating the hitchhiker. I think from the moment where he cuts his hand, when he gets into the van, everyone is sort of on high alert.
Right, but the thing is,
being very cautious about how they engage with him.
Exactly, and it's a wonder that they just don't expel him at that point. But it's Franklin that has the conversation with him and that almost gets along with him. They kind of talk about working in the slaughterhouse and how
I mean, if we're suggesting that like Franklin is a little soft boiled in addition to being a paraplegic, like that's not the case. I don't think that's the case. Okay. I think Franklin is perfectly compass. I mean, it may be my interpretation. I think Franklin is perfectly compass mentis. I think he's an asshole. If I were his friends, I would not want to be pushing him around either.
Okay. Yep. So my next question is really about the mythology of this film. And there is this opening crawl / monologue voiced by John LaRoquette. Interestingly.
Ladies and gentlemen, Night Court's own John LaRoquette.
Which seems to posit this was all a true story taking place on August 18th, 1973, which strangely enough was also my parents' 11th wedding anniversary. Whoa. So talk to me about truth and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I would suggest that there's more operating as connects to Ed Gein than simply the masks. We know that Ed Gein made household objects and other items of clothing out of the skins of the bodies that he would dig up from the cemetery, or the few occasions on which he murdered someone. And of course, Geen also ate some of what he acquired as well. So I mean, the sort of cannibalism, the use of the human materials in the building of furniture and making of lampshades, things like that. I mean, that is all drawn fairly straight from Ed Gein's story. But right. I think the entire history of film is populated with projects that purport to be ripped from headlines or based on true stories, when in fact very often it's a tiny narrative thread that's used as a point of inspiration.
And the winner is... Well, the time has come.
Well, now it's time for the awards segment of our show.
My favorite segment.
In which we give out prizes for the scenes and characters that we think make this such a memorable film.
Or not. Let's start with most disturbing scene. This is the Tom Six Award, named for the erstwhile auteur behind the Human Centipede
franchise
cinematic universe. Who do you got?
I think the most disturbing scene may be the scene with the hitchhiker in the van. Because
that is disturbing. You're right.
Right. I mean, every character's sort of hackles are up because of the hitchhiker, and I think that translates to the audience as well. To which scene would you give the Tom Six Award, Mr. Winnick?
Well, I'm gonna just be utterly predictable here and say the dinner scene, and the attempted bludgeoning that doesn't happen. I think the reason it's disturbing to me is because you are sort of become Sally. It's from her point of view, and there's a doominess and a hopelessness to that situation that feels like, if you were ever in that situation, you would just be, you're dead. And all you're thinking is you're dead and you're going to go in the worst possible way. Horrible inside. Let's move on to the a bit of a lighter tone here. The most likable character, the Seth Brundle Award, named for our buddy Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. I'm gonna ask you, Bradford, is there a most likable character in this film?
It's really hard. I mean,
isn't it?
I think I have to give it to Marilyn Burns.
Wow.
But I think it's really tough to find a likable character in this film. There's nothing particularly wrong with any of the gang in the Mystery Machine, but
they're a little colorless.
They are a little 1D, but
yeah.
I mean, Marilyn Burns, her Sally is like the prototypical final girl. And so I think I'm going to be very woman first and make her my most likable character and give her my Seth Brundle Award.
Although she's not plucky, in the sense that like
I don't think she has to be.
Well, no, but when you think about final girls, you think about like Nancy and Nightmare on Elm Street, and she's at least resourceful, or Fool in People Under the Stairs. You think of those characters and you think that, well, at least they've got something on the bad guys.
There's a quality of heroism about them, right?
Marilyn is she's someone that things are done to. She's not someone who does things.
She doesn't have a lot of agency.
No.
But she does have adrenaline that gets her through two plate glass windows
it's true.
At two different points during the film.
No, it's true.
And that keeps her alive until the end.
Right.
To whom do you give the award?
Leatherface.
The most likable character is Leatherface?
Yep.
You have anything you want to say about that?
Sure I do. Just because you're a homicidal chainsaw wielding maniac doesn't mean you can't be likable.
Just because you're an inbred redneck cannibal doesn't mean.
Honestly, his intentions are so pure. He has a single purpose. He carries it out. He says what he feels, which is
He doesn't say anything.
Even if it's just
Right.
you know,
Uh-huh.
and he has a nice little dance at the end. I mean, what's not to like?
You make him sound like Napoleon Dynamite.
He's just, you know, he's not dancing to, was it Chumbawamba? I don't remember what it is.
He's just dancing to the music in his head
And the music in his head,
sounds of his chainsaw.
He makes a nice supper. He brings it to the table. He dons an apron.
And a woman's face.
And a woman's face. I don't know. I didn't like any of the characters in this film. This is a really hard one. So I'm gonna give it to Leatherface.
All right. I mean, I feel like you're giving out the most likable character award in the way that I usually give out the most likable character.
That's the least unlikable character, you know?
Right.
But anyway, so speaking of, let's talk about the character who most deserved to live and doesn't. The so-called Ellen Ripley Award, named for Sigourney Weaver's character in the Alien franchise. Who do you got?
I mean,
I know.
I might have to give that one to Franklin.
Oh.
Paul Partain's Franklin. And for the sole reason
Yep.
that when he's dispatched by Leatherface, it's done in the dark, and I didn't get to see the life leave his eyes. I dislike the character so much, but I mean, you know, if I wasn't going to get to appreciate his being hacked to pieces, then maybe we might as well just have kept him alive.
Yeah. I concur.
What about oh, really?
Yeah, I concur. I gotta say, I think it's Franklin, if only because I feel bad for the guy. I'm sure that the filmmakers don't want us to feel bad for him. I don't know. I don't know if the filmmakers want us to feel bad for him or not, but I think that he certainly doesn't have a great way of defending himself. And as annoying as he may be, he's at least somewhat colorful.
Fine.
Do you want me to say Leatherface?
No,
because he does live, you know, so
he lives.
Technically doesn't qualify for the award.
I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if I've always followed that rule when giving out the award. You know, I mean, like there are certainly characters who do live, who deserve to live.
Right.
But let's talk about the character who most deserved to die.
Sure.
The John Doe Award, you may be familiar with.
I'm familiar with that, named for Kevin Spacey's
character in Seven.
You know, if I hated anybody, I mean, I know you're going to say Franklin, but at the same time, there is something incredibly creepy and skin crawling about the hitchhiker. And he does die in a spectacular way. He is the least predictable character in this film because he could just go off and do anything, and he does do some surprisingly nasty things in this film. And so for John Doe, I'm giving it to Edwin Neal as the hitchhiker.
Okay. I'm going to give my John Doe award to Jim Siedow as the old man, daddy. You know, I mean, I just feel like he is probably the least impacted by the legacy of genetic betrayal that impacts, you know, that affects his inbred redneck cannibal family,
his progeny,
his brother cousins, his nephew brothers,
sister lovers.
Yeah, exactly. Brother lever hiker sheriffs. Which is a whole subgenre of horror that we'll eventually one day get into.
Please.
But I mean, I really do think that he is just the most sort of like sidewinding, four-flushing, untrustworthy character in the film, and they should really have dispatched with him.
Although he's got some good-looking barbecue in that gas station, let me tell you.
He is major with the barbecue.
Although, God, you know, after you see the film, you're like, I know exactly what he's cooking up in there.
Right, exactly.
It's somebody.
And
I think Franklin
eat barbecue the same way again.
Well, Franklin eats something, and there is a point.
Franklin's a fat ass.
Well,
so...
you know, also Franklin. There is a point in the film where Franklin kind of looks at what he's eating and it's kind of like puzzling over it. That struck me as kind of funny because it's you don't quite know that they're cannibals at that point. But when
Right.
you look back at that moment, you're like, something tastes a little funny there to Frank. Okay, here it is. The most gratuitous screen moment, the Gaspar Noé / Ken Russell Award. I'm going to start. And again, I'm going to disappoint you.
No.
Yeah, it's the dance at the end. And the
That's
reason
gratuitous?
No, I'm just kidding.
Thank
I'm
you.
not giving it that award. The most gratuitous scene is when Franklin rolls down the hill and tumbles out of his wheelchair, because it's like that. That's not cool. And so to me, that is the most gratuitous moment.
Okay. I will not be echoing your sentiment. I would give it to the moment when Teri McMinn's character Pam is hoisted up and dropped onto the meat hook.
Oh, that's gratuitous?
I mean, I think
Come
again.
on,
I mean, I really think
You're
it
going
depends
soft
upon
on me here.
I think it depends upon how you're defining your terms.
Uh-huh.
But I think it is. I think it's a tough thing to look at. Again, I mean, I think my opinion of that owes a lot to that sort of verite quality of the film as a whole.
Can I say it's tougher to think about than it is to look at?
Possibly.
Because
but I mean,
you don't
really,
see anything. You don't
it's just
see
the anything,
idea. Right. It's the idea.
It's not just the idea, because there's a kind of visceral sort of the when she's dropped onto the hook, it lurches. Do you know what I mean? Like you see the effect of her weight on the hook and vice versa.
That's true. And she does scream, and it's painful to listen to.
Yeah. And I think that if we're, and of course, acknowledging the fact that there is so little stage blood spilled in the course of this film.
Right.
I mean, I do think I think it's the most gratuitous screen moment.
You know what's interesting is you think of films which have a lot of blood in them. You think of It.
Mm-hmm.
You think of Nightmare, and
I mean, it set records. Hundreds and hundreds of gallons of blood.
Well, but so did Nightmare, and so did The Shining. I mean, when you think about like all the blood in those films that is spilled, and how much blood could have been spilled in this film, and yet isn't. Again, maybe it was the director and producer trying to get that PG rating ridiculously absurdly. But at the same time, it's just like, what kind of film would this have become
if it were awash in blood?
Right, exactly. It makes you wonder.
Probably never would have been seen anywhere, quite frankly.
You're probably right. You're probably right, because it just would have been too hard to watch. I mean, there's a level
this film as it stands was banned in so many markets in so many countries around the world.
England
for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
England, Australia. I mean, in England, based on this film, you couldn't put the word chainsaw into the title of a film without it's being completely banned.
And the funny thing is that they probably hadn't even seen the film, because it's like, again, if you see the film, you're just shocked by how little gore there is in it and how much is left to the imagination. It reminded me, it reminded me of the first time I saw Reservoir Dogs in the theater, and the scene where the cop's ear is cut off. Tarantino keeps the camera rolling, but cuts away in that moment and then cuts back, and the ear is gone. But you don't see the act of Michael Madsen cutting the ear off the cop. And it's like, it truly is a great illustration of how what you don't see sometimes is better than what you do see, or the fact that you have to use your imagination.
Sure. I mean, it's like in Greek tragedy, right? The ekaklema, where the thing happens and you wheel on the tableau and you show the after, but you don't show the act.
Yep. Yeah. That's right. Well, Bradford.
Well, Eric.
What a joy this has been.
Always a pleasure.
A real pleasure. Thank you so much for introducing me to this wonderful story of love, peace, hope, and redemption in rural America.
In Texas. Well, Eric, I mean, I do what I can to bring you, as deeply into the fold as you're willing to go.
I cannot thank you enough. And we hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you do, give us a rating on iTunes. Tell your friends. Subscribe.
I think people should also maybe check out some additional information on our website, 21jumpscare.com. Our theme music is by Sir Cubworth.
And Bradford Lorick, by the way.
Oh, I did a little remixing. Listen, how can our audience find you online, Mr. Winnick?
You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Letterboxd. You could even find me on Instagram. I don't know why you'd want to, but go ahead, knock yourself out.
They can find you at the opening of an envelope, Eric.
You can find me at the OK Corral. Thanks for joining us, folks.
We'll see you next time at the internet's latest address for horror, 21 Jump Scare.